Happy day to all. Today, Class 10, Chapter 16, Management of Natural Resources, Day 2. Today, we will see the topic Water for All. So, water is a basic necessity for all terrestrial forms of life, and we have studied in Class 9 about the importance of water as a resource. We have seen the water cycle and how human intervention pollutes water bodies. However, human intervention also changes the availability of water in various regions. So, after we, I would like to move on to the uses of water and about the dam, its advantages, disadvantages, and water harvesting, different methods of water harvesting, and then some of the natural fuels, coal and petroleum. So here we know uh, when we study the rainfall pattern, it does not reveal the whole truth behind the water availability in various regions in India. Rains in India are largely due to the monsoons, and this means that most of the rain falls in a few months of the year. Despite nature's monsoon bounty, failure to sustain water availability underground has resulted largely from the loss of vegetation cover, diversion for high water demanding crops, and pollution from industrial effluents and urban waste. Irrigation methods like dams, tanks, and canals have been used in various parts of India since ancient times. And these were generally local intervention management by local people and assured that the basic minimum requirement for both agriculture and daily needs were met throughout the year. And the use of this stored the daily needs which were through, met throughout the year. And the use of the stored water was strictly regulated, and the optimum cropping patterns based on the water availability were arrived at on the basis of decades or centuries of experience. So the maintenance of these irrigation system was also a local affair. So the arrival of the British, it changed these systems as it changed many other things. So the conception of large scale projects, large dams and canals traversing large distances were first conceived and implemented by the British and carried on with no less gusto by our newly formed independent government. So these mega projects led to the neglect of the local irrigation method, and the government also increasingly took over the administration of these systems, leading to the loss of control over the local water sources by the local people. So they started engaging or forming dams. So we will see. Before that, I would like to. There are certain areas where they use, that is in parts of Himachal Pradesh, Kuls had evolved a local system of canal irrigation called Kuls over 400 years ago. The water flowing in the stream get diverted into man-made channels, which took this water to numerous villages down the hillside. So the management of the water flowing in these schools was by common agreement among all the villagers. Interestingly, during the planting season, water was first used by the village uh, farthest away from the source of the Kul, then by villages progressively higher up. So these schools were managed by two or three people who were paid by the villagers. And in addition to irrigation, water from these schools also percolated into the soil and fed springs at various points. So after the schools were taken over by the irrigation department, most of them became defunct and there is no amicable sharing of water as before. Next, we should pass on to the dams. So, what are the advantages of dams? Why do we seek to build dams? So, the large dams can ensure the storage of adequate water not just for irrigation but also for generating electricity. And the canal system leading from these dams can transfer large amount of water in a greater distance. That is, for example, the Indira Gandhi Canal has brought greenery to considerable area of Rajasthan. However, we know that mismanagement of the water has largely led to the benefit being cornered by a few people, and there is no equitable distribution of water. Thus, people close to the source grow water intensive crops like sugarcane and rice, while people farther downstream do not get any water. So, the woes of these people who have been promised benefits which never arrived are added to the discontentment among the people who have been displaced by the building of the dam and its canal network. So, some of the advantages we will see: irrigation of crops, producing electricity, supplying water to towns and cities, and to control floods. Next, we should see some of the problems or disadvantages of dams. So, when we first see the social problems, it displaces a large number of people who have to be rehabilitated. And economic problems, it is expensive and uses a huge amount of public money. When we talk about environmental problems, they contribute enormously to deforestation and the loss of biological diversity. The people who have been displaced by various development projects are largely poor tribals who do not get any benefit from these projects and are alternated from their lands and forests without adequate compensation. So the outseas of the Tawa Dam built in the year 1970 are still fighting for the benefit they were promised. Next, we should see the water harvesting or the rainwater harvesting and different ways how it can be managed. So, watershed management emphasizes the scientific soil and water conservation in order to increase the biomass production. And the aim is to develop primary resources of land and water to produce secondary resources of plant and animals for use in a manner which will not cause ecological imbalance. Watershed management not only increases the production and income of the watershed community but also mitigates droughts and floods and increases the life of the downstream dam and reservoirs. So various organizations have been working on rejuvenating ancient system of water harvesting as an alternative to the mega projects like dams. So these communities have used hundreds of indigenous water saving methods to capture every trickle of water that had fallen on their land. dug small pits and lakes, put in place simple watershed systems, built small earthen dams, constructed dikes, sand and limestone reservoirs, set up rooftop water collecting units. All this has recharged groundwater level and even brought rivers back to life. Next, we should see. So, before moving on to that, we will see that is the disadvantages of underground water. It does not evaporate easily. Also, it spreads out and recharges the wells. It provides moisture for irrigation of crops and it does not get polluted easily. It does not provide breeding grounds for mosquitoes as well as house flies. So next we will see the water harvesting is an age-old concept in India. Khadins, tanks and nadis in Rajasthan, bandharas and tals in Maharashtra, bandis in Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, ahars and pines in Bihar, kuls in Himachal Pradesh. Already I have explained. Ponds in the Kandi belt of Jammu region and eris which are nothing but tanks in Tamil Nadu. Surangans, Surangams in Kerala and Kattas in Karnataka are some of the ancient water harvesting, including water conveyance structures still in use today. So the water harvesting techniques are highly local specific and the benefited are also localized. And giving people control over their local water resources ensures that mismanagement and over exploitation of these resources in reduced or removed manner. Different methods of water harvesting is being explained. Here you can see the picture. So on-farm system, that is water harvesting. It can have micro catchment, macro catchment, and flood water methods. So, so the micro catchment, on-farm system, rooftop system. Same way, the macro catchment, it is wadi bed system and off-wadi system. So which has been explained. So in largely level terrain, the water harvesting structures are mainly crescent-shaped earthen embankments or low, straight concrete and rubble check dams built across seasonally flooded gullies. So the monsoon rain fill the ponds behind these structures. Only the largest structure hold water year round and most dry up 6 months or less after the monsoon. And their main purpose, however, is not to hold surface water but to recharge the groundwater beneath. And the advantages of water stored in the ground are many. It does not evaporate but spreads out to recharge wells and provides moisture for vegetation over a wide area. So in addition, it does not provide breeding grounds for mosquitoes like stagnant water getting collected in ponds or artificial lakes. So the groundwater is also relatively protected from contamination by human as well as the animal waste. So the next set of natural resources comes the coal and petroleum. So we have seen some of the issues involved in the conservation and sustainable use of resources like forest, wildlife, and water now. So these can meet our needs perpetually if we were to use them in a sustainable manner. So now we come to yet another important resource, that is the fossil fuels, that that is coal and petroleum, which are important resource of sources of energy for us. So since when we talk about this in the industrial revolution, we have been using increasing amounts of energy to meet our basic needs and for the manufacture of large number of goods upon which our lives depend. These energy needs have been largely met by the reserves of coal and petroleum. So coal and petroleum, they are fossil fuels formed by the decomposition of dead plants and animals inside the earth. After several millions of years, they are non-renewable sources of energy. So the petroleum reserves may last for about 40 years and coal reserves may last for about 200 years. So the coal and petroleum, it contain carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen and sulfur. When they are burned, they release carbon dioxide and oxides of nitrogen and sulfur. The carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas which causes global warming, and oxides of nitrogen and sulfur combines with moisture in the air and produces acid rain. So by looking to these sources, or based on the high concentration of carbon dioxide as well as the release of such uh, acids, that is gases which produce the acid rain, we will see it these usage of indiscriminate usage of coal and petroleum, it can lead to intense global warming. So we will see what is here to about the acid rain. Results of acid rain: when sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide are emitted into the atmosphere and transported by wind as well as air current. The sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides react with water or moisture, oxygen, and other chemicals to form sulfuric and nitric acids. And these then mix with water and other mineral materials before falling to the ground, while a small portion of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides that causes acid rain is from natural sources such as volcanoes. So most of it comes from the burning of fossil fuels. The major sources of sulfur dioxide as well as nitrogen oxide in the atmosphere, they are when we burn these fossil fuels, it generate electricity, and two-thirds of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide and one-fourth of nitrogen oxide in the atmosphere come from this electric power generations. Next, it is the vehicles and heavy equipments, where we know if we that is taking a bus using um, so we will see later, we will see what how come we can prevent these or relatively increase the advantage and decrease the disadvantages of environment friendly usage of natural resources. We will see the last one is the manufacturing of oil refineries and other industries. So next we should pass on to um, the, there is simple choices that can make a difference in our energy consumption pattern. So taking a bus, using a personal vehicle, or you can use a cycle, or by walking you can move. Using bulbs or fluorescent tubes in our homes, and using the lift, or taking the instead of that is use lesser lift, you can take the stairs. Wearing an extra sweater or using a heating device. So instead of using heater, you can use sweaters. So the management of coal and petroleum also addresses the efficiency of our machines. Fuel is most commonly used in internal combustion engines for transportation, and research in the fields uh, concentrates on ensuring complete combustion in these engines in order to increase the efficiency and also reduce the air pollution. Here, when we talk about all this, we know some of the impact of global warming, melting of polar ice and glaciers. So the ice, which act like a protective cover over the earth and our ocean, these bright white spots reflect excess heat back into space and keep the planet cooler. In theory, the Arctic remains colder than the equator because more of the heat from the sun is reflected off the ice back into space. So, glaciers around the world can range from ice that is several hundred to several thousand years old and provide a scientific record of how climate has changed over the time. Through their study, we gain valuable information about the extent to which the planet is rapidly warming. They provide scientists a record of how climate has changed over time. Today, about 10% of land area on Earth is covered with glacial ice. Almost 90% is in Antarctica, while the remaining 10% is in Greenland ice cap. Sea ice and icebergs form and melt strictly in the ocean, whereas glaciers are formed on land. Icebergs are chunks of glacial ice that breaks off glaciers and fall into the ocean. So when glaciers melt, because that water is stored on land, the runoff significantly increases the amount of water in the ocean, contributing to global sea level rise. The rapid glacial melt in Antarctica and Greenland also influences the ocean currents, as massive amounts of very cold glacial melt water entering warmer waters, which is slowing ocean currents. And an ice on land melts, sea level will continue to rise. Here you can see these are the glaciers in the Antarctic and sea ice in Finland. So we have reached to the end of our chapter, an overview of natural resource management. So the sustainable management of natural resource is a difficult task. In addressing this issue, we need to keep an open mind with regard to the interest of various stakeholders. We need to accept that people will act with their own best interest as the priority. But the realization that such selfish goals will lead to misery for a large number of people and a total destruction of our environment is slowly growing. Going beyond laws, rules, and regulation, we need to tailor our requirements individually and collectively so that the benefit of development reach everyone now and for all generations to come. So together we should move for the betterment of the natural resource management. Thank you.